Hello there, and welcome to Corey Loses for the 2021 year preview channel update, I guess. So, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about plans for what we're going to be doing on Corey Loses and my lower channel, Corey's Datapad, since I figure this is just going to go up on Corey Loses, but for anyone who's kind of interested in this kind of update video, you're probably either following both or just following Corey Loses. So, just going to stay here, but we will be talking about both channels. And then towards the end of the video, I'm going to be including the Q&A, the patron Q&A from November. So I actually recorded that initially when it was supposed to go out, but then I ended up not editing and posting it. So we're going to do it now, and then hopefully I'll be able to get back to doing the patron Q&As every month again. So today we're largely going to be talking about like what kind of content I want to introduce or change, or what improvements I want to make over the course of the year, and a little bit about goals as well. We've recently hit 26,000 on Datapad subscribers and 32,000 on Corey Loses for subscribers here. So that is a pretty huge amount of growth over the course of the last year, over the course of 2020, especially towards the end of the year. Datapad, I was really bad at all year. I'm not happy at all with how often I was posting videos there and even the quality of some of the videos. But part of it is that I wasn't like I was still getting the feel for how I wanted to edit the videos and what kind of topics I'd be able to cover, what was good enough to make a video. So that was always something that I kind of struggled with. But talking with Eck, especially, like he was always very much just telling me, you find an idea, just make it. It's much better to just make the video, put it out there. And like I've kind of gotten more into that mindset, especially through December, where I was able to kind of streamline the process of how I write the scripts, how I do the videos. For a while, I was trying to do just like get the ideas, make the bullet points that I want to address, and kind of speak off, not off the cuff, but speak without a script and then edit that down. But I've kind of gone more back towards doing fully scripted stuff, which I'll probably do alternating between the two, depending on the topic and the type of video. But I am a bit more comfortable with uh, what I can and can't make videos on there. And I've largely just decided on like what I can make videos on is whatever the hell interests me. Because I think before, part of the problem that I had, and for those who are unfamiliar with it, Datapad is my lore channel. In case you haven't seen that from here, I will link that in the description. But for a while, I was kind of concerned about like, oh, if I make this video, then like some people are already going to know that, but like then the video is not for them. If I find something interesting, I may as well just do the video, and then worst case scenario, someone comments on it and says, "I already knew this." Okay, that's fine. But I feel like I've gotten to a better kind of flow with that. The other big issue with it is that I can't necessarily do everything I want to do with the graphics for it because my rendering on my PC is really slow. This computer I kind of built, I think I last updated it in like 2017, maybe 2018. And I was working with a super limited income at that point. So uh, it was kind of like middle of the range or middle of the road. And I focused on getting stuff that would work for Empire at War specifically. But now that this is like my actual job and this is what I spend all day doing, uh, I feel like getting some better parts that allow me to make the videos faster. Because like rendering is the longest part of the process for me almost for both channels, which is kind of ridiculous because I should probably be able to render those datapad videos that I do in a couple minutes, and sometimes it takes up to an hour. When I use the galaxy map, which I spent a lot of time on making, then the rendering time can sometimes take 5 or 6 hours, even though it's like a 20-second clip. And it really shouldn't be like that. I can like there's got to be some setting somewhere that I'm using wrong, but I think part of it does just come down to not having very optimized hardware for a workstation. So I am kind of looking at getting something that works a little better for that. And even when I'm playing Squadrons, like my performance there has been bad. I had to upgrade my RAM for that, and that actually did help with rendering videos. That sped it up significantly because I was working with like 16 gigs before, and then now I have 32, and that alone was a big upgrade. But getting something that was for the CPU, just focusing on like very few cores, but very good single core performance so that I could run Empire at War as smoothly as possible in 2016, 2017, or 2018, I forget. That worked at the time, but it's starting to kind of like show the limitations of that. So one of my goals is as soon as there's actually computer parts available that aren't trillions of dollars to start upgrading that. And I'm putting some of the money from the donation goals in December towards that, where we did like the full playthrough streams. That money is primarily kind of earmarked um, for computer upgrades and stuff that I can use to help improve the channel. Because one of the things I really do want to focus this year is improving on quality. So the editing that I do, I want to focus a bit more on that and getting some of the visuals in the video better. That's always been one of my weaker points. And part of that is going to come with reducing the amount of content I'm doing in certain areas. So over the last year, I've started shifting towards doing, rather than having an Empire War playthrough every day, all day. There was a while this year where I kind of tried out having one going at a time with the Empire of the Hand one, and that allowed me to do some other stuff on the channel, focus on streaming some other games as well. And this has kind of been the first year where that's gotten any traction. Uh, like a couple days ago, I did the last KOTOR 2 stream, and there was something like 200 concurrent viewers at its peak, even though I was having internet problems, which is like, it's a really cool thing to have where uh, I don't necessarily feel like I'm locked into that one thing quite as much. Obviously, Empire War is always going to be a big part of the channel, always has been a huge part of the channel. But the ability to like sometimes stream something like KOTOR or FTL and have that get some traction is really cool. And the fact that like Datapad exists as something that is entirely separate from Empire at War, that's something that's been kind of a concern for me for years now. Like ever since I've started, that is this only viable as a career as long as people are interested in Thrawn's Revenge specifically or Empire at War more generally. And I'm starting to see that like it can definitely be a part of it, but it doesn't have to be everything anymore, and that's nice. So like even though we've had for the last month 2 or 3 Empire at War playthroughs, because I figured it's December, let's have fun with that, and I really just wanted to play a bit more. Uh, I think for a lot of the year we'll probably have like one active Empire at War playthrough, and then do a couple of those single sitting stream campaigns as well. Uh, and I'll probably do more episodes at once for when we have just one campaign. Because like the Empire of the Hand, when I was doing 2 30-minute episodes between like September and November per week, and that wasn't enough to get through the campaigns fast enough. But I just kind of wanted to see if that was a viable thing to do. And especially when I threw on some of the Empire at War like shitposty meme videos, there was still enough going on that I think people weren't too displeased with what we had. So like it'll definitely be more than in those points, but less than when it was like 7 days a week Empire at War episode, and then maybe something else would fit in as a secondary video. Uh, it's like I want to do more streaming as well, both on Twitch and YouTube. And I've usually been doing it so that I'll have a video and I'll have a stream every day. And when I'm trying to do 3 or 4 datapad videos now per week, along with a video every day on Corey Loses, and then a stream every day, that gets to be a lot of time, and I was finding myself unable to like find the time to even mod as much as I'd want to, let alone actually important stuff like being able to spend time with Dana, or I wasn't gonna be able to see family or friends this year, but that would have probably taken a hit. Uh, I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to fall behind on like even answering people's messages, uh, where it I want to try to manage my time a bit better. So focusing on doing the stuff that's important for work, important for friends and family and life, uh, and avoiding some of the stuff that was like less productive and more frustrating. And part of that, not the frustrating part, just comes down to trying to communicate a bit more broadly rather than individually, where I still want to answer as many comments and messages as I can, but I want to have a better way both for the mods and for channel information to kind of address stuff in an accessible way rather than in one-on-one conversations with people. Because like I'll still try to have those as much as is reasonable, because I do enjoy like talking to people individually. But there'd be days where I'd like sit down to work, either on the mod or on video stuff, and rather than getting anything actually done for everyone, I'd end up having a couple hour long conversations with people, one on one, that could have just as easily or just as productively been done in like a uh, in another way, or could have spent that time getting work done so that I'd actually be able to do some of the other stuff that I commit to. Because I do think I committed to a bit too much this year, or rather 2020, because there was the datapad stuff, Corey loses stuff, so videos and streams, plus like TapCaf, especially when we were trying to read a book every week. That got to be a lot. Our podcast, me and Eckhart's Ladder, and then I'm also contributing to X2, so I do a couple streams with them per week on top of the ones that are like joint streams where I'm streaming as well. There'd be stuff like Mario Kart, where we just drink and play Mario Kart, but that also that isn't a video for Corey loses. That's stuff I'm doing just for Eckhart or for X2, along with a couple like individual videos I've done for that channel throughout the year. Uh, where I still want to continue to do that, but I want to be a bit more selective in what I'm committing to, uh, just to make sure that I'm not overcommitting and that I can still deliver on stuff that I say I want to do, because that's been one of the things that I've regretted the most this year is when I say I want to do something and then it just takes forever for me to get to it. Uh, it's like there've been a few videos that I got approached to make in like December with some other modders, who wanted me to give their mod a try, or the uh, or other indie games that have come and kind of wanted me to take a look at stuff. And generally, I'll try to say yes to these things, but sometimes I'll have to be a bit, I think, just be okay saying like, I can't do this right now, maybe later. And I started doing that a bit more in December, but like the Battlefront 2 remaster video is something that I've been hoping to make since like December 14th or something. I forget when Harrison first messaged me, but that's something I want to kind of get better at, is just time management generally. And I think that'll be a lot better, or that'll result in things getting finished a lot more efficiently, but also giving me the chance to have enough of a backlog that I can spend some time on the kind of professional development side, where I can work on learning different skills, like improving the video editing, learning to do some of the renders and stuff that Connor does, so that I can use those for thumbnails. So that is one of the main things that I want to kind of work on. So yeah, I think that broadly covers a lot of what I wanted to talk about, what we're kind of going for here. As far as specific goals, I would really like it if, like, I think a reasonable goal to have for both channels is to get to 50,000 subscribers for each of them by the end of the year. I think that's doable. The, like, kind of pie in the sky goal would be to get one of them to, like, 100,000 subscribers if I can. And like if you're in the right situation, you can really grow pretty fast. Like if you look at what happened with X2 and Squadrons, X2 kind of became one of the places to go for Squadrons on YouTube, and that drove a lot of growth for that channel. And I don't know if like I'll see about like any of the games that might be coming out this year, if I can hammer down on them a bit more than I was able to with Squadrons. But I also want to make sure that I'm not trading what have been kind of mainstays for the channel, or things that have helped the channel get to where it is. As I'm just as happy to kind of like, as much as I want to hit these goals, I'm just as happy to have like more sustainable, slower growth if that's what's available to me. Like I'm not going to be upset if we don't hit those things, as long as I'm still able to pay rent and everything. But yeah, so that's kind of where my head's at for the year, is basically the time management stuff, trying to focus on improving quality now and maybe diversifying a little bit more, and seeing how far we can get towards those goals. So I guess before we get to the Q&A, I just want to thank you all for your support throughout 2020. Hope you guys have enjoyed the videos, or watching the videos, as much as I've enjoyed making them. If there's any kind of like specific things you'd like to see me try, then you can leave those in the comments. I will do the Q&A now, and then I will hopefully be able to do these patron Q&As every month, and then maybe open up some of the questions a bit more. Patron rewards are another area that I kind of want to look at for this year. I will probably have to, at some point this year, start doing the patron credits automatically, just off of a list of patrons, rather than having the opt-in, opt-out process, just because it gets to be a lot to manage and track. Uh, so we'll see what ends up happening there. Either way, thanks again, guys, and watch some Q&A. All right, so now it is time to do the Q&A. This is I'm going to be reading this from my phone, so I'm not just looking down at nothing or checking text while I'm doing this. I'm recording this before I'm recording the first part of the video, so maybe something will come up in a weird order here. But we only have a few here. I'm hopefully going to be doing this more often, depending on how many questions there actually ever are. But we'll see. So the first question is going to come from Liam, who asked, how are various government systems for non-mainstream factions going to operate? So in Thrawn's Revenge, can you give examples? And how will the balance of space and ground work in Revan's Revenge, as you will be in a time period that deals with more with ground combat and just simply not as big of fleets? How the mod play differently. So for government mechanics, we'll probably be talking about those more individually. So there will be like more specific announcements with those once they're set up. So there's really not a lot I can say there. But with the stuff for Revan's Revenge, we are basically going to the way we're balancing the mod is going to be basically keeping the same projectiles and then balancing around that. So with Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic, there wasn't as much concern about like we wanted to make sure that stuff in one could work in the other without having to restat it entirely. In Revenant's Revenge, that won't be the case. But as far as the difference between like space and ground focus, there's still a lot of space stuff, that like space combat that we see in the KOTOR era. KOTOR itself is obviously a lot more ground focused. It's an RPG. The game will probably be more like infantry focused in particular. It's more about how the fleets will be structured rather than how it's emphasized on ground versus space. So there's a bit less to work with than the Clone Wars, for example, which has a lot more visual mediums with a lot more stuff that's applicable directly to a grand strategy game for it. But there's still a lot there, so we have enough to work with overall. And it's not like we're really lacking in space options to use for it. So I'm not that concerned about that. It will play somewhat differently because of the scale of combat, and kind of the focus more on infantry and the Jedi and stuff, compared to what you'd get with the more vehicle focus with, well, infantry is still really important, but there's usually just more of them and kind of playing more around how they interact with vehicles. So it's using the same kind of base applications of the systems, but with different contexts and different emphases, which I think should make them all relatively interesting. Like all the different mods kind of compare differently to each other. But yeah, a lot more of that kind of information will come as we get closer to that stuff being done. I don't know how much specific mod information I'm going to be able to give in these kinds of videos. Daniel's asking, what was the reason you got into Star Wars and why do you still love it? So I first got into Star Wars. My first time doing anything Star Warsy was watching Episode 1, actually. My cousin had it on VHS. I think it was definitely before Episode 3 came out. I don't know if Episode 2 in it was out yet. I don't think it was. I don't remember the exact year. But we were bored, and we decided to watch Episode 1. I thought it'd just be like, haha, nerd stuff. I've talked about this, I think, recently in another video as well. But I ended up really enjoying it. So I started getting into it. I started reading the books. And like I was always interested in history. So having this fictional series that kind of had this long history and how like seeing how the different stories kind of interconnected or in some place contradicted each other and the resolutions to that was always interesting to me. And that's always been what's kind of kept me on Star Wars. Like there are other series that I could go to as well for that, but who has the time? Or I don't have the time. Like there are some that I've kind of tried to get into, but didn't quite grab me in the same way, or I didn't really have the time to focus on them quite as much as I was able to with Star Wars. But that's basically how that went. Like I tried to watch Star Trek. I didn't love TNG that much. Uh, I think I watched up to the Wolf 359 stuff, and then I just kind of fell off. I was watching it before going to bed, like before work. So I'd like put an episode on at midnight, fall asleep either like right near the end or just before, get up at 5 a.m. and then go to work. So I don't know if that like affected my enjoyment of it at all. Probably it did. I really want to watch Deep Space Nine. And I actually did get pretty into Stargate, but I didn't even finish that, and I really want to. Like, I have a huge problem actually finishing with the media I start to consume because I just if I fall off it for a couple days, I'll just not go back to it. That was my problem with Mass Effect 1, where I started to play it and I still want to finish it, but the same thing with like Skyrim. But because I didn't finish it in that initial period, I just ended up never going back to it. But next question is from Evil Bob the Bob, who says, "Who is your favorite developer and why is it me?" I'm legally unable to answer that question, either part of it. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to skip past that one. Otherwise, there's whole HR ramifications and stuff. Tritone is asking, "How are you?" Appreciate the question, but I probably talk about that in the part that I'm going to record after this. So maybe I won't talk about that at all. And then I've just screwed Tritone out of his question. But Darth Jelly Tart the Tasty asks, "Is there a game you really enjoy but kind of suck at?" I don't know if like RimWorld or FTL fall into that category right now, because I'm sure like those are the games that I play where people are most prone to be like, "Oh, you're doing this wrong," but like that's part of the fun for those games to me. Like I don't know that I've ever had a game where I get kind of backseat gamed as much as FTL, but I still just love kind of seeing what happens in that game. Where I'm just as happy to like fuck around and take a suboptimal thing. I don't really ever go for min maxing on any game. Uh, the only game where I get, or the only games where I've really gotten like approached it, especially competitively, have been like League of Legends, Halo 3, and Squadrons. And even with those, I don't know that I necessarily put in as much time as I would want to be like actually competitive. Other than maybe League and like back in the day, Halo 3. Because Squadrons I've wanted to play a lot more than I've actually been able to play. And I think I'm like reasonably good for how much time I've put in. Uh, Especially because like playing with Eck and Charlie, who played so much more than me. Like Eck is up near Galactic Ace rank, so we always get matched up against those people. And I've managed to like still be useful in the games. I can't dogfight with like Scalp or anyone like that, but I can still be useful enough in those games. I really want to be better at that. And I feel like this year we're probably going to take part in like a couple tournaments, so maybe I'll get a chance to justify practicing. But I think yeah, FTL and RimWorld, those kinds of games that I like. I really love playing them. I don't play them especially well, but I also don't always necessarily want to play them especially well. Like when shit's on fire in RimWorld, that's fun. Like those games you kind of play to see how wrong things can go, right? So uh, that's always been a lot of where my enjoyment with that comes from. FTL sometimes I think it's like absolute bullshit with some of the RNG, but that's part of the game too. You kind of go in thinking like, how is this going to screw me now? Three Cole is asking, what has been biggest difficulty when it comes to modeling, texturing, coding, rigging, etc. Uh, the thing I typically got most annoyed with was UV mapping actually, because there's a lot of fun that I have with modeling and texturing where you can kind of like see how things are progressing or even coding. I'm assuming we're leaving out like bug fixing because that's by default just the absolute shittiest thing because you can spend 8 hours debugging something and it'll be terrible. Because like you could find this like one line of code that fixes it and then you've wasted several hours. But UV mapping, so basically when you're modeling or texturing, if you have uh, it's something that people actually do a lot in school, I think, where you have kind of those sheets of paper with the cube broken up into the six sides, where they're kind of like attached. So you cut them out and you fold them together to make the cube. That's basically what UV mapping is, the reverse of that, where you take the cube, you cut it up, and then you would lay it flat into those so you can like draw on it. That's how you get a texture onto a model, is having that 3D model. You break it up into its flat faces, combined however really makes sense for how it's going to flatten out. So if you have like a flat side, that could have any number of polygons, because all the little shapes have to have 3 or 4 sides. And then you could, on like the side of a Star Destroyer, might have 100 faces that are kind of facing the same way. And then those would be part of one thing. So it's kind of like a folded cutout of a model. And getting it into that point has always been my least favorite thing to do, because like anything else, you can kind of see the progress you're making. If you're making a model, you can see it start to come together. If you're making a texture, you can see it start to come together. If you're coding a new feature, you can like kind of see where it's going. With a UV map, it's just like the prep to get to those parts, and that's always been kind of annoying to me. I know there are some people who actually enjoy it. I think Slevered really likes it, but or not really likes it. I don't know that anyone can really like it, but I think he finds it relaxing. Luckily, Blender is really good at like auto UV mapping, and Substance Painter, which is what we use to texture most things now, is uh, you're kind of painting directly on the model. So if the UV layout isn't that great, then as long as things are spaced properly, then you're fine. Whereas before, when you'd have to draw by hand in Photoshop, if things weren't like connected in the right way, you'd have to like draw a line on this shape, but then its connecting edge is like way up here. So you'd need to go and like make sure that lines up, render it a bunch of times. Substance Painter's the best. Uh, but other than that, I think rigging and sins is one of my least favorite things to do. That's why there's such a hold up there, because XSI mod tool is just terrible. But that I think UVing and sins rigging have to be my answers there. The next question comes from Charles Outlaw. We've seen ship crews in 3.0 previews as a way to introduce multiple resource types to EAW. If you could inset it without upsetting the way the game runs, is that the gameplay feature you'd most like to add? Is there a lore-based feature you'd like to add? I think the biggest thing that would be helpful for EAW for adding those kinds of features is actually a better way to identify ships between the galactic and tactical level. So like having the game track different things, and then particularly having a way to display things. Being able to properly display things is one of the biggest impediments to adding new stuff to Empire at War. Like you can even see with the stuff we've added so far, where it has to be like the ship crews are up in the top left corner. Up that'd be up here, I think, on your guys' screen. Yep. So I have to use my right hand. I'm still not used to filming on camera. But yeah, so we'd have to put in like those screens with the button you press, and then it'll open a new menu, and then it's all in text, and it turns into like a 90s DOS game at some point. So having better ways to kind of modify the UI and add that kind of element would be super helpful. That'd be one of the so it's not necessarily a feature itself, but I think that is what holds back most features. Because the way that Lewis scripting works in Empire War is actually really flexible, because you can make whatever you want in the Lewis scripting, and then you kind of just have to piggyback off of other game objects. But you can do a lot with that, and we've only done so much ourselves. So aside from that, and uh, performance improvements, so having the game be able to run on more than one core, that would really help with a lot of stuff. Because there's a lot of things that aren't just necessarily like, oh, is this possible or not? It's, is the trade-off in performance going to be worth it or not? Or how can you structure this in a way that can be both readable for the player, is working in game, and isn't going to tank performance? Because there's been a few things we've done where it's like, okay, this would be kind of cool, but the trade-off in performance, like this would have to be running constantly on the galactic level or something, and then most people aren't going to be able to play with that, so it's not worth having. Hopefully that answers that question. And I think that covers all the questions for this month. So these were the November questions. We skipped out on the July ones. I probably spoke about that at the start of the video, or I will speak about that at the start of the video. I will have spoken about that at the start of the video when I record that part right after this end of the video finishes. But yeah, so I will put up the question thread for the patrons on Patreon along with the credits thread. I'm thinking, I'll talk about that earlier, so forget it. But the thread will be up on Patreon for patrons, and then depending on how many questions there are, I will probably open it up to other questions as well. 'Cause I think we're going to do it that way, where it's like the main questions come from Patreon, and then there will be like overflows coming from the YouTube comments. Either way, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you are looking forward to the content coming this year. Hope you enjoyed last year. As far as the channel goes, I don't think anyone actually enjoyed last year. It's like UV mapping, but hope it wasn't too rough on you guys. So thanks again for watching. Hope to see you next time.